Was the US involved in the attempted coup in Venezuela? Washington says it wasn't, even as detained suspects seem to claim otherwise. But as the US and most of Latin America want Nicolas Maduro out of power, what does that mean for Venezuela? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Peter Dobby. Now, on the 3rd of May, the Venezuelan government announced it had detained a group of what it called mercenaries trying to reach Venezuela on speedboats along with several dozen Colombians. The group reportedly numbered around 50. At least 8 people were killed in the incident as the Venezuelans in effect ambushed the group, having apparently waited for them on shore. The mission, according to the government, was to kill Venezuela's president, Nicolas Maduro, and then spark a coup in Caracas. But others claim the plan was to abduct Mr. Maduro and then take him nobody knows where. A Florida-based security company has claimed responsibility for the operation, which was coordinated, reportedly, with Venezuela's opposition led by Juan Guaido. But President Maduro insists the United States, and specifically President Donald Trump, knew about the plot from the very start. Well, Venezuela does have a history of mistrust when it comes to the US over alleged attempted coups. Back in 2002, the Bush administration was accused of plotting to remove the then president, Hugo Chavez. A group of generals took over the capital and forced Chavez to resign. But millions of people who had elected Chavez surrounded government buildings and institutions, demanding their democratic rights and the release of their president. Within 48 hours, he was back in power. But all fingers pointed at the opposition and senior members of the White House. OK, we'll talk to our guest in a moment. First, let's talk to J.J. Rendon. He's the Presidential High Commissioner and a general strategist for the Juan Guaido government. He joins us on Skype from Miami in Florida. J.J. Rendon, welcome to Inside Story. As an attempted coup, this failed and failed big. So what did it realistically achieve?
I mean, it depends. We are not related to the action of this guy there, the legitimate government, my person. We didn't talk with these people from November last year. So whatever they did by themselves.
So why does El Nuevo Herald in your country say Mr. Guaido was aware of the plans when they were being incubated? He delayed and delayed and delayed and then distanced himself from what he was being told, we assume via an intermediary, was in the planning stages.
That's called freedom of speech. The Herald can say whatever they want. In reality, we were analyzing every scenario possible for the freedom of our country, including some scenarios that might have a consideration of uses of force or picking someone delivered to justice using other means necessary.
OK, you're saying that his government considered all scenarios. Just interrupt you for a second. You're saying his government considered all scenarios, including a use of force. Did he or anybody from his government talk to this security company in Florida?
Yes.
So they did talk to the security company in Florida.
Lawyer, diplomats, sure. We talk with a lot of people to analyze that. OK, so Mr. Guaido spoke directly with this security company in Florida, the same security company. No. We, the Commission, talk with a lot of people to understand every scenario, yes. I'm
confused, sir. Did he or did he not talk to this company in Florida?
People, the president was not involved with the conversations. The president was in Caracas doing his job, and we were delegated to analyze every possible scenario, yes.
So that's a yes. He did talk to this security company in Florida?
No. Indirectly by us, we, the Commission, talk with a lot of people analyzing that and a lot of other scenarios, yes.
I'll take that as a yes, then. So, Mr. Maduro...
Yes, the president was not leading any conversation or having any meetings. We, the Commission, were doing that.
Mr. Maduro now has 2 high-value Americans in custody. What do you think he'll do with them?
Very sad. I mean, I believe that in this particular case, he will treat them well, but we don't expect anything like, we don't have any expectation. We have a history of the government during the last year torturing people, killing people, disappearing people, not giving a fair trial at all. So we don't know. It's a tyranny. It's a dictatorship. It's a criminal state. So we don't know.
Doesn't this make...
It's very sad that happened.
Pardon me for interrupting you again. Doesn't this make your man, Mr. Guaido, look bad by association? You've told us now, as part of our conversation, just let me finish the point. You've told us now, as part of this conversation that you and I are having, that you and your people do talk to everyone and anyone about a potential use of force. You have not categorically denied that you spoke emphatically with this security company in Florida. By association, Mr. Guaido, pardon me, by association, surely Mr. Guaido looks tainted here.
I assume, yes. We all look bad at the light of this situation, because a rogue person doing a rogue operation by himself, even if we're not related to the operation, and we sitting with him in October or November last year, even if we never talk with him again, yes, it looks bad. It doesn't look nice.
Mr. Endon, good to talk to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
OK, as promised, let's get the thoughts of our main guests today. Joining us out of Miami, Ramon Muchacho, the former mayor of Chacao district, an opposition stronghold in Caracas in Venezuela. In Denver, we have Isaias Medina, a member of the Council of Rumbo Libertad, a self-described libertarian party in Venezuela. And in McLean, Virginia, we have Pedro Borelli, a Latin America political analyst and managing director of B+V Advisors, a business management consultancy group. Gentlemen, welcome to you all. Isaias Medina in Denver first. Mike Pompeo, the US Secretary of State, says we were not involved. If the States wasn't involved, who was?
Very interesting, and thank you very much, Peter, and thanks to Al Jazeera for its continued interest in the Venezuelan cause. In my opinion, the U.S. was not involved, and I will give you three evidence that I have found in that would explain that. For example, first, Cleaver Alcala was indicted by the U.S., and he himself in social media talked about this contract in April 26 before surrendering himself to the DEA. He confessed 1 month prior to this act of failed action of the existence of the signed contract. Second, that same day, Colombia seized its weapons that were en route to Riohacha, where this operation was concentrated. I would believe at this point that the American and Colombian message was very loud and clear not to pursue. The other evidence for sure would be that the CIA has met several times with Silvercorp in Jamaica, as per connectingvets.com, and had told them not to pursue this action. The final, I think, evidence is very clear when AP published an article before the failed attempt uncovering these blueprints of the military action. Then, in my humble opinion, if the U.S. was ever to be involved in such an action, the result would be completely opposite to what happened. And we probably would be talking about a different situation right now.
OK, let's go to Ramon Muchacho in Miami. Ramon Muchacho, we're talking here about this security firm based in Miami, run by one or two former U.S. Green Berets. I noticed today their website has been taken down. Before it was taken down, there were reported claims that the website was a figment of somebody's imagination. Literally, they had copied and pasted from different security company websites. And on top of that, the guy that runs the company claims to have had conversations with people high up in Washington. Does the company that allegedly organized this whole thing have any credibility at all beyond being able to employ and deploy muscle on the borders of Venezuela?
Well, thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. Let me start by saying that I completely agree with what Isaias was saying, in the sense that there's a lot of evidence that lead us to think that the U.S. government was not directly involved in this operation. In any case, they may have tried to abort or can cancel in some way this operation. I think it's clear the U.S. government thought this was not a good idea. Going to your question, this small firm, Silver Corp, it seems like a very, very small, a one-man show, a one-man company. I don't think has the credibility nor the resources to go ahead with an operation like this one. Seems like this guy was able to convince some people around President Guaido, some people in his team, that he will be able to do something more like bigger, stronger. That was not the case. And for me, that's the reason why President Guaido and his team stopped talking to him last year, and they never went forward with the contract they have signed.
Pedro Borelli in McLean, Virginia. This was surely just a completely barking mad, balmy idea from the get-go. If you've got a ragtag collection of Colombians being orchestrated, trained and run by 2 or 3 formerly US Green Berets, in theory, the possibility was always there that they would end up squaring off against hundreds of thousands, literally, of Venezuelan military. It was never going to work.
Yeah, but Peter, I think what has not been explained to your broad audience, and I think it might be confusing for them to understand, is the stages. What I think is this is a situation in which a country is being held hostage, and there's an attempt to free it. And the attempt goes from maybe a badly identified company as a contractor. That disappears. That contractor continues to work with a ragtag group of Venezuelan military officers who have left Venezuela and are in Colombia. That group gets its arms taken over by the United States and its leader arrested by the United States. And then they continue on to the next phase. So in the third phase, what we're watching is a collapse of the third phase. A third phase, which probably went from something in which we're trying to work for the legal government of Venezuela, for the legitimate government of Venezuela that has a mandate to get Maduro out of the seat of power, and it ends up with a botch operation by a group of mercenaries, probably turning to bounty hunters, because what changed between November, October, November, when there were conversations with this company and elements of the legitimate government of Venezuela, and now is that the United States put a $15 million bounty on Maduro's head and a $10 million bounty on 2 of his main sidekicks. So what I think happened is that these individuals who were dying to get into the business, who failed to get engaged by the legitimate government, who tried to get engaged or work or cooperate with dissident military, by the way, Chavista dissident military. These are not democratic, this affected Chavistas who do not like Maduro, who were trying to get rid of Maduro. That fails when the United States disrupts that plan, and they go after a 15 million plus a 10 million plus another 10 million. So it's a pretty sizable bounty, I thought. And what I think happened was that they were completely infiltrated, and this was a absolutely buffoonish, crazy operation by bounty hunters. But it's the evolution of this from a rescue of the country, exploring options, legitimate options, to ending up with this charade.
Okay, thanks for the clarity on the timelining of that, if you will. Asias Medina in Denver. Is Mr. Maduro maybe bigging this up as well? Because the week before this happened, there was a big riot in a big, well-known prison in Venezuela. 46 people were killed, 70 people were injured. He wants that off the front page, and along comes aggressively diplomatic gold for him, so he can withdraw to the presidential palace and say, everyone's getting at me again.
Yes, without a doubt, this operation was a chronicle of an ambush foretold, another of Maduro's Castro narco communism schemes. They have had the Chavista clan infiltrating in the opposition government of Juan Guaido from the get-go. posing as democratic Chavismo, which is an oxymoron. Chavismo should be banned like Nazism was in Germany after the war. In my humble opinion, with all due respect, the biggest mistake from Juan Guaido has been up to date to involve Chavista drug traffickers and people involved in grand corruption in any strategy. Cleaver Alcalá and El Pollo Carvajal, for example, both with U.S. indictments for money laundering and drug trafficking. Alejandro Betancourt, investigated in several jurisdictions for grand corruption, supposedly siding with Guaido, according to the Washington Post. Another double agent infiltrated in the opposition would be Cesar Omaña, a bipartisan bagman, as per his own public letter, declared being an acquaintance of both Leopoldo López and Diosdado Cabello, who's Maduro's second in command. The first failed mock attempt was April 30th, whereas when Guaido and Leopoldo López were both seem to have an agreement with convicted assassin Michael Moreno and Padrino López. The first one, president of the illegitimate Maduro's puppet corps, and the second, Maduro's defense minister, supposedly to overthrow the butcher of Maduro. This, as we know, never happened, and they were fooled by double agents again.
Understood. That's a claim that has yet, the double agent part of it, that claim has yet to be substantiated. But I just want to move the discussion on in a slightly different direction because we are heading towards the end of the programme. Ramon Muchacho in Miami. I mean, there are elements, aren't there, to this that you couldn't make up. I mean, if you wrote it in an airport novella, somebody would say, no, that's too much. Rowan Kraft as in the cheese family, the cheese empire, he reportedly, according to the Washington Post and the New York Times, was approaching his friends because he'd been approached by the security company in Florida to finance this because he allegedly thought, oh, if we are involved in toppling Maduro, we get first dibs on the oil and gas contracts. And you couldn't make this up.
Well, I don't know. It's part of the drama we have been seeing. Seems like this guy from Silver Corp was able to convince some people that he was able not only to do the operation, but to raise the funding himself, and that's for me it's a crazy idea. But let me take this opportunity and your question to point out the most important thing here. Venezuela remains a threat for the whole region. This is not a problem that we will resolve among private companies or security companies or with a private guerrilla or a private army. There's no way, that's not the way to resolve our problem. The only way out is for the strongest democracies in America, like the US, Colombia, and Brazil, to get together, the Grupo de Lima, the Lima Group, get together and exert strong pressure over Maduro and even consider the use of military force. This is no time for jokes. This is no time for crazy adventures. It's time for diplomacy. It's time for politics. It's time to save a country that is not only disintegrating, but it's threatening the stability of the whole continent, starting with Colombia, but including the US.
OK, and that's a fair point, isn't it? Pedro, Borelli and McLean. Mr. Maduro's supporters, his sympathizers, would always say the same thing. They would say he's always been on the receiving end of a particular kind of antagonism. But the reality is, as we said at the top of the show, here on Inside Story, most of Latin America wants him gone. And they would say, we want him gone with good reason.
Most of Venezuelans want him gone. I mean, I think in any country in which somebody presides over the destruction of 80% of the GDP of a country, the destruction of the entire private sector, and actually to boot the destruction of the oil sector, which was really the seed and what has maintained this country being what it was, and actually the Chavista revolution being able to do what it attempted to do and to buy influence around the world. I mean, Venezuela is now producing 500,000 barrels of oil and has no gasoline. We used to export gasoline. When I was on the board of the oil company, we were a very large exporter of gasoline to the United States, and we're producing 3.3 million barrels of oil versus 500,000 today. So most people want this man out. This man is not just incompetent, he is criminal. And this is a fundamental problem where I agree with Mayor Muchacho. We've got to define the problem and then find the solution. The error in the world is that you you make a diagnostic based on something that you wish is what's going on in Venezuela, and then you find a solution for that. You're never going to dialogue, and it's been proven in attempt after attempt of dialoguing with Maduro that you can sit down with a narco trafficker and that he's going to give up. He has nothing to gain from a negotiation. He has everything to gain from holding on to power. So my sense is, yes, there is a problem here, a problem that has to be solved very differently. And by the way, the United States, which has been very committed to the subject in terms of discourse on some actions, has to understand that when you put a bounty on somebody's head, you're going to get this crazy kind of operation.
People follow the money, of course. Sure. Pedro, I just want to hit the pause button on you there for a second, if I may. Forgive my bad manners. Let's go back to Isias Medina in Denver. Isias Medina, the reality here is that Mr. Maduro has two high-value Americans. You know, we've all seen the videotapes now, post-interrogation. That does not play well in an election year in the United States. So Mr. Maduro has got leverage. Where will he try to go with that leverage? Because this is a man, he's a political survivor. Like him or not, he survives economic downturn. He survived economic turmoil. He survived political pressure.
Well, he does have the best advisors in history for the wrong reason on the dark side, which are Russia, China, Iran, and Cuba. So for sure, he has survived it because he's got 70 years of experience of rogue actors and rogue states. But in my opinion, this could become his last and biggest mistake, to meddle and to play around with former soldiers, U.S. soldiers in Venezuelan territory. Regardless of what they have done, he now has to follow up the rules of course, the due process. And he also has to be able to send them back home. Otherwise, he's giving one more reason, a legal reason for the U.S. to act. They should already be acting under Article 51 of the UN Charter for the legitimate self-defense, because they are not only a present risk to the national security of the U.S., Colombia, and Brazil, but also to the maintenance of peace and security in the region and the world. So in my opinion, yes, what we need is a Plan Colombia to activate the DEA agreement and extract these universal enemies, to activate the international military cooperation by invoking the Venezuelan Article 287.11 of the Constitution, and to comply with the Supreme Court order that has ordered Guaido to seek an international humanitarian intervention with military support since the decision of 2017.
Okay, let's go back to Ramon Muchacho in Miami. Would it be easier for the United States if they got rid of the $15 million price tag on Maduro's head? Because all three of you have said the same thing. If you've got a price tag on a dictator's head, people will try and follow the money. And that's what Silvercore, this security company out of Florida, have clearly tried to do. And it's detonated in their face, and it's blown the world of diplomacy up in the air surrounding the whole Venezuela issue.
Yeah, well, I don't know if that it's a real possibility. You know, one thing is the U.S. government and the Trump administration, and a different thing is the Justice Department and the whole justice system that is prosecuting crime. Nicolas Maduro and his friends are indicted right now. So I don't know if that's a possibility, but I don't think that putting a price on his head or removing that price will change things dramatically. I think the problem remains the same. Nicolas Maduro is using military force against Venezuelans to remain in power. He has been able, and he will continue to be able, to remain in power even after hundreds of thousands dead or leave the country. He is able to resist, because there's no way, there's nothing that's more important for them and for their government, the regime, than to stay in power indefinitely. So again, the world must come together and unite to resolve the Venezuelan issue. It's not a problem of the Venezuelan people only, but it's a problem for the whole region and for the whole world.
Gentlemen, a really revealing conversation today on Inside Story. Thank you so much for talking to us. They were our guests. They were Ramon Muchacho, Isias Medina, and Pedro Borelli. And thank you, too, for your company. You can see the show again on the website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, do check out our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. That's at AJ Inside Story, or tweet me. I'll tweet you back. I'm at Peter Dobby1. From me, Peter Dobby, and the team here in Doha. Thanks for watching. We'll do it all again at the usual times tomorrow. Until then, bye-bye.